What if I told you that the person you are right now, with all your habits, beliefs, and limitations, could be completely transformed in just 1 year? Would you believe me? What would it feel like to shed the skin of your current identity like a snake discarding what no longer serves it? To emerge renewed, powerful, unstoppable. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the anxieties, doubts, and fears that once controlled your life have disappeared. Not temporarily hidden away, but fundamentally dissolved. That the limitations you once accepted as just who I am have been replaced with a profound sense of possibility. This isn't fantasy. This isn't positive thinking. This is the reality of human potential when properly understood and unleashed. Most of us live our entire lives trapped inside a prison we never realize exists. We become so accustomed to our limitations that we mistake them for laws of nature. I'm just not good with money. I've always struggled with my weight. I'm not a morning person. I'm terrible at public speaking. These statements feel like observations, but they're actually sentences, prison sentences we've imposed upon ourselves. But here's what fascinates me. What if these limitations are nothing more than software running on the hardware of your mind? Software that can be deleted, rewritten, and replaced. Think about it. You weren't born believing you couldn't speak in public. You weren't born thinking you lacked discipline. You weren't born convinced that success was for other people. These are programs you've downloaded throughout your life, from parents, teachers, friends, society, and most importantly, from your own interpretation of life's experiences. Have you ever wondered why some people can experience devastating setbacks and emerge stronger, while others are broken by much smaller challenges? Same hardware, different software. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. What if the you that you identify with isn't actually you at all? What if it's just a collection of outdated programs running on autopilot, creating the same results over and over again? Here's a truth that most motivational content won't tell you. Transformation isn't about adding more to who you already are. It's about strategic demolition. It's about identifying and destroying the aspects of yourself that are holding you back before you can build something new. We've been sold the idea that self-improvement is about adding new habits, adding knowledge, adding skills. But what if the real secret is subtraction? What if it's about removing the limiting beliefs, the self-sabotaging behaviors, and the false identities that keep us small? Picture a garden overrun with weeds. You can keep planting flowers amid the chaos, but they'll struggle to grow. Or you can first remove the weeds, prepare the soil, and then plant your flowers in ground that's ready to support them. Your life is that garden, and many of us spend years trying to plant success, happiness, and fulfillment in soil that's choking with weeds. I discovered this truth through my own painful journey. For years I tried to build a better version of myself while keeping my core limiting beliefs intact. I would set ambitious goals, create detailed plans, and generate temporary motivation, only to find myself back where I started months later. It wasn't until I lost everything, my business, my relationship, my health, my confidence, that I was forced to confront a terrifying question. What if the person I think I am is the very obstacle standing in my way? This question launched me into a 3-year exploration of identity, human potential, and the mechanics of personal transformation. I studied individuals who had undergone radical reinvention, from addicts who became health advocates, from bankrupt entrepreneurs who built empires, from the chronically depressed who found lasting fulfillment. What I discovered was a pattern, a formula for total reinvention that nobody was talking about. While most personal development focused on incremental improvement, these individuals had achieved something far more profound. They had engineered a death and rebirth of self. They didn't improve the old version of themselves. They destroyed it and built something entirely new. This process isn't comfortable, it isn't safe, and it certainly isn't what most motivational speakers promise. There are no quick fixes or simple life hacks here. This is about fundamental transformation at the level of identity, the kind that changes everything downstream. The most dangerous misconception in personal development is the belief that transformation should feel good, that if you're doing it right, you'll feel inspired, motivated, and energized throughout the process. This is a lie. Real transformation feels like death, because, in a very real sense, something is dying. The old you with all its comfortable limitations and familiar patterns, and death, even metaphorical death, is rarely comfortable. When a caterpillar transforms into a butterfly, it doesn't just grow wings. It first dissolves into a cellular soup inside its chrysalis. Its body literally breaks down before the new form can emerge. This process, at the cellular level, would feel like absolute destruction if the caterpillar could experience it consciously. Your transformation will require a similar dissolution. The difference is that you must initiate and navigate this process consciously. Most people never transform because they retreat at the first sign of discomfort. They mistake the necessary pain of growth for a signal that something is wrong. They pull back just as the process is beginning to work, never realizing how close they were to breakthrough. This is why the personal development industry has a recidivism rate that would embarrass the criminal justice system. People cycle through book after book, seminar after seminar, program after program, collecting information without experiencing transformation. Information without implementation isn't just useless, it's dangerous. It creates the illusion of progress while keeping you exactly where you are. It gives you the language of change without the reality. But what if I told you that this cycle can end, that the gap between knowing and doing, between intention and action, can be closed permanently? The method I'm about to share with you isn't just another set of motivational principles or productivity hacks. It's a systematic approach to destroying and rebuilding your fundamental identity, your beliefs about what's possible, your unconscious patterns, and the invisible forces that shape your everyday decisions. This approach is built on a counterintuitive premise. You cannot become your best self while remaining yourself. Let that sink in for a moment. The version of you that exists today, with all its current thinking patterns and emotional responses, cannot produce dramatically different results from what it's already producing. A transformative outcome requires a transformative shift in who you are at the core. Think about a simple example. If you currently identify as someone who struggles with discipline, how likely is that version of you to suddenly become disciplined? Every fiber of your being, your thoughts, your emotions, your self-image is aligned with the identity of being undisciplined. You might force yourself to act against this identity temporarily, but the gravitational pull of who you believe yourself to be will eventually win out. This is why willpower always fails in the long run. It's trying to overcome the massive force of identity with the limited resource of conscious effort. But what if, instead of battling your current identity, you systematically dismantled it and built a new one? What if you could reshape your core beliefs about who you are until discipline became as natural as breathing? This isn't theoretical. This is exactly how lasting transformation happens, and it follows a predictable pattern that you can learn and apply. Throughout history, this pattern has emerged again and again in different contexts. Religious traditions call it death and rebirth. Psychology calls it identity reconstruction. Personal development often calls it reinvention. Whatever name we give it, the process follows the same fundamental stages: confrontation with reality, demolition of the old self, and strategic construction of the new. Most approaches to change fail because they skip the first two stages and jump straight to building something new. They try to add empowering habits to a foundation of limiting beliefs. They attempt to create success from a mindset calibrated for failure. Imagine trying to build a modern skyscraper on the foundation of a medieval cottage. No matter how excellent your building materials, the structure will be compromised from the start. Yet this is exactly how most people approach personal transformation. What's required instead is a complete excavation, digging down to solid bedrock by questioning your most basic assumptions about who you are and what's possible for you. This process will challenge you in ways that are both uncomfortable and exhilarating. It will require you to question beliefs you've held your entire life. It will demand that you face truths about yourself that you've been avoiding. It will push you to engage with the parts of yourself that you've kept hidden, even from yourself. But on the other side of this process lies freedom, the freedom that comes from authoring your own identity rather than inheriting it or absorbing it unconsciously from your environment. Most people never experience this freedom. They live their entire lives reacting to circumstances, unaware that they have the power to recreate themselves from the ground up. They accept the story they've been given rather than writing their own. What makes this approach so powerful is that it targets the root of all behavior, identity. When you change what you believe about yourself at the deepest level, everything else changes automatically. You don't have to force yourself to take action. The new you naturally acts in alignment with who you've become. This is why people who undergo true transformation often report that it feels effortless to maintain their new behaviors. The smoker who truly stops identifying as a smoker doesn't need willpower to avoid cigarettes. The idea of smoking becomes incongruent with who they are. The same principle applies to every area of life. When you rebuild your identity around health, discipline, abundance, courage, or any other quality you desire, you no longer have to fight against yourself to embody these traits. They become your default settings. But make no mistake, while maintaining the new you becomes increasingly effortless, the process of transformation itself is anything but easy. It will demand everything from you. It will require you to develop a relationship with discomfort that few people ever cultivate. The path I'm describing isn't for everyone. Many will prefer the comfort of their familiar limitations over the challenge of becoming someone new. They'll choose the safety of mediocrity over the risk of greatness, and that's a valid choice. Not everyone needs to transform. Not everyone wants to maximize their potential. For many, a comfortable life within the boundaries of their current identity is enough. But I suspect you're not one of those people. The fact that you're still listening suggests that something within you recognizes a deeper truth, that you are capable of far more than you've demonstrated up to this point. That somewhere beneath the accumulated layers of fear, doubt, and limiting beliefs lies your authentic power waiting to be unleashed. In the chapters ahead, we'll walk step by step through the process of destroying your old self and building something remarkable in its place. We'll explore the science behind identity change, the psychological triggers that keep us trapped in outdated versions of ourselves, and the practical strategies for engineering a complete personal reinvention. This journey isn't about becoming a slightly better version of your current self. It's about becoming an entirely different person, someone who sees possibilities where your current self sees obstacles, someone who takes action where your current self hesitates, someone who creates results that your current self would consider impossible. The question isn't whether such a transformation is possible. The evidence is overwhelming that it is. The real questions are you willing to do what it takes? Are you prepared to leave behind the comfort of who you've been, for the possibility of who you might become. Because once you understand the mechanism of complete personal reinvention, you can never go back to not knowing. You can choose not to apply it, but you can no longer tell yourself that you're stuck with who you are. So before we go further, I want you to consider carefully whether you're ready for this journey, because the principles and practices I'm about to share will change you if you apply them. They will dismantle the limiting version of yourself that you've been living with and replace it with something far more powerful. Are you ready to destroy the old you and become unstoppable? Are you ready to destroy the old you and become unstoppable? Let's begin with the most difficult step in any transformation journey, facing the unfiltered truth about where you stand right now. Transformation begins with clarity, not comfort. And clarity requires that we see ourselves not as we wish to be, not as we pretend to be, but exactly as we are in this moment. Most of us move through life with distorted mirrors, reflections that show us only what we want to see or what we fear seeing. We've developed sophisticated mechanisms to protect our ego, to maintain the story we tell ourselves about who we are. These mechanisms might have protected you emotionally in the past, but now they're the very barriers standing between you and your evolution. Think about the areas in your life where you feel stuck: your career, your health, your relationships, your finances. For each area that isn't where you want it to be, I want you to consider a confronting question. What truth about yourself are you refusing to acknowledge? This question cuts to the heart of why most transformation efforts fail before they begin. We try to build new realities on foundations of denial and self-deception. It's like trying to navigate using a map that deliberately misrepresents the territory. You'll never reach your destination because you don't know your true starting point. Let me tell you about Michael, an entrepreneur I worked with who had launched 3 businesses, all of which had failed within 2 years. When we first began working together, Michael had an elaborate explanation for each failure: market conditions, unreliable partners, insufficient funding. His story positioned him as a victim of circumstance rather than the architect of his outcomes. For Michael to transform, he first needed to confront a brutal reality. His businesses hadn't failed because of external factors. They had failed because of his inconsistency, his inability to focus on one strategy before jumping to the next, and his habit of avoiding difficult conversations with team members who weren't performing. This truth was initially devastating for Michael. It shattered his self-image as a visionary entrepreneur who just needed the right conditions to succeed. But that shattering created space for something new to emerge. Once Michael accepted his role in creating his past results, he could begin the real work of transformation. He could identify the specific patterns that led to failure and develop strategies to overcome them. Within 18 months of this realization, Michael had built a profitable business that continues to thrive today. Michael's story illustrates the first principle of transformation: you cannot change what you do not acknowledge. Most of us live in a state of sophisticated denial. We know something is wrong, but we've constructed elaborate justifications for why things are the way they are. These justifications serve a purpose. They protect our ego and absolve us of responsibility, but they also trap us in cycles of repetition. So how do we break through this denial and see ourselves clearly? It begins with what I call the brutal mirror exercise. This exercise requires you to examine each major area of your life: health, relationships, career, finances, and personal growth, and answer 3 questions with complete honesty. First, what are the actual measurable results I've created in this area? Second, what specific behaviors and decisions have led to these results? Third, what beliefs or fears are driving these behaviors? Notice that these questions move progressively deeper, from the visible surface of results to the hidden drivers of behavior. This progression is crucial because lasting transformation happens from the inside out, not the outside in. When most people attempt change, they focus exclusively on behaviors. They try to force themselves to exercise more, save more money, or be more assertive at work. But these behavior-focused approaches almost always fail because they don't address the underlying beliefs and fears that drive behavior in the first place. It's like cutting back the visible part of a weed without pulling out the roots. The weed will always grow back. Let me walk you through what this exercise might reveal. Take health, for example. The measurable results might include your current weight, energy levels, strength, endurance, and relevant medical markers. The behaviors might include what you eat, how frequently you exercise, how much you sleep, and how you manage stress. But the real insights come when you identify the beliefs and fears behind these behaviors. Perhaps you believe that you don't deserve to be healthy. Perhaps you fear that prioritizing your health would mean sacrificing your career success. Perhaps you believe that your genetics determine your health, so your choices don't really matter. These deeper drivers, not your surface behaviors, are what you must confront and change to create lasting transformation. Now, I want to acknowledge something important. This process is uncomfortable. In fact, if you're doing it correctly, it should feel like you're voluntarily stepping into an emotional fire. You're confronting aspects of yourself that you've spent years, maybe decades, avoiding or denying. But this discomfort serves a purpose. It's the necessary pain of seeing reality clearly, perhaps for the first time, and clarity, even painful clarity, is infinitely more useful than comfortable delusion. Remember, the goal here isn't to judge or condemn yourself. Self-flagellation is just another form of avoidance. The goal is simply to see the truth without flinching. To develop what the Zen tradition calls beginner's mind, a state of clarity unclouded by preconceptions or emotional attachments. Once you've completed the brutal mirror exercise for each area of your life, you'll likely notice patterns emerging. Certain beliefs, fears, and behaviors will appear repeatedly, manifesting in different contexts, but stemming from the same roots. These patterns are your personal operating system, the unconscious programming that runs in the background of your life, shaping your decisions and behaviors without your awareness. For most people, this operating system was installed early in life through a combination of family dynamics, cultural conditioning, and significant emotional experiences. You didn't choose it consciously, you absorbed it. And because it operates largely beneath conscious awareness, it can be difficult to identify without deliberate effort. But once you see these patterns clearly, you gain a superpower, the ability to consciously choose which aspects of your programming to keep and which to replace. This brings us to the second principle of transformation. Awareness precedes choice, and choice precedes change. You cannot choose to change something you're not aware of, and you cannot change something you haven't chosen to change. This sequence, awareness, choice, change, is non-negotiable. You cannot skip steps. I worked with a woman named Sarah who was constantly overwhelmed and burning out in her career. Through the brutal mirror exercise, she discovered a pattern that had been invisible to her. She habitually took on responsibilities that weren't hers, worked longer hours than her colleagues, and rarely asked for help. When we explored the beliefs driving these behaviors, Sarah realized she was operating from a core assumption that her value came from how much she did for others. This belief had been installed during her childhood, when she received praise and attention only when she was being helpful or responsible. This awareness was transformative for Sarah. For the first time, she could see that her burnout wasn't a personal failing or an inevitable result of her career choice. It was the logical outcome of her unconscious programming, and once she saw this clearly, she could begin to choose a different pattern. Over time, Sarah developed a new belief that her value came from who she was, not just what she did for others. This new belief led naturally to new behaviors, setting boundaries, delegating appropriately, and making time for rest and renewal. Within 6 months, her experience of work had transformed completely. Sarah's story illustrates an important truth. When you change at the level of belief, behavior change follows naturally. But when you try to change only at the level of behavior, you're fighting against the gravitational pull of your underlying beliefs. This is why willpower-based approaches to change almost always fail in the long run. As you work through the brutal mirror exercise, you may experience resistance. Your mind might generate distractions or reasons to stop. You might suddenly remember urgent tasks you need to complete. You might find yourself getting sleepy or hungry. You might even feel physical discomfort. This resistance is normal and even expected. It's your ego's natural response to a perceived threat. Remember, your ego is designed to maintain stability, not to facilitate growth. Any threat to your current self-concept will trigger resistance, even if that change would ultimately benefit you. The key is to recognize this resistance as part of the process, not a signal to stop. In fact, resistance is often a sign that you're getting close to an important insight or breakthrough. It's like the burn you feel during intense physical exercise, uncomfortable in the moment, but an indicator of growth to come. As you push through this resistance and complete the brutal mirror exercise, you'll likely experience two seemingly contradictory emotions, a sense of heaviness and a sense of liberation. The heaviness comes from fully acknowledging the gap between where you are and where you want to be, between who you are and who you could become. When you stop denying or minimizing this gap, you may initially feel weighed down by the magnitude of the change required. But alongside this heaviness comes a profound liberation. The energy you've been using to maintain your illusions is now available for actual transformation. The mental and emotional resources consumed by denial and justification can now be directed toward growth. This dual experience, confronting difficult truths while feeling liberated by them, is at the heart of what I call productive discomfort. Unlike destructive discomfort, which leads to shame, paralysis, or avoidance, productive discomfort energizes and clarifies. It's the discomfort that precedes growth. Now let's talk about another critical aspect of confronting your current reality, identifying your self-limiting patterns. All of us have developed patterns that once served a purpose, but now limit our growth. These patterns typically fall into 3 categories: avoidance, control, and validation. Avoidance patterns are strategies for escaping discomfort or perceived threat. They include procrastination, distraction, numbing behaviors like excessive alcohol or screen time, and various forms of perfectionism, which is often just a sophisticated form of avoidance. Control patterns are attempts to manage uncertainty through excessive planning, rigid routines, micromanagement, or attempts to manipulate others or circumstances. Validation patterns involve seeking external confirmation of your worth through people-pleasing, achievement addiction, comparison, or approval-seeking behaviors. These patterns form a self-reinforcing system that keeps you stuck. For example, a validation pattern of seeking approval might lead to an avoidance pattern of not taking risks to avoid disapproval, which then leads to a control pattern of over-preparing for even minor challenges to ensure approval. To break free from these patterns, you must first recognize them in action. This requires developing what psychologists call metacognition, the ability to observe your own thoughts and behaviors as if from a third-person perspective. Try this exercise. For the next week, set a reminder on your phone to check in with yourself 3 times a day. When the reminder goes off, ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What triggered this feeling? How am I responding to this feeling? This simple practice begins to develop your metacognitive muscle. Over time, you'll become increasingly aware of your patterns as they unfold in real time, rather than recognizing them only in retrospect. As you identify your self-limiting patterns, you might be tempted to immediately try to change them. Resist this temptation. For now, focus solely on awareness. Change will come later. Remember, you've been running these patterns for years, possibly decades. They're deeply ingrained in your neural pathways. Trying to change them through sheer force of will is like trying to redirect a river with your bare hands. It requires a more sophisticated approach, which we'll explore in later chapters. For now, simply notice these patterns with curiosity rather than judgment. Each time you observe a pattern without getting caught up in it, you create a small space between stimulus and response. Over time, this space will grow, giving you greater freedom to choose your responses rather than being driven by unconscious programming. Let's move on to another crucial aspect of confronting your current reality: understanding the role of your comfort zone in maintaining the status quo. Your comfort zone isn't just a metaphorical space, it's a physiological and psychological state in which your nervous system feels safe and your identity feels secure. Your body and mind are designed to maintain this state whenever possible. This biological preference for homeostasis explains why change is so difficult, even when we consciously want it. Our systems interpret any significant deviation from established patterns as a potential threat, triggering subtle or not so subtle stress responses that push us back toward familiar territory. Think about the last time you attempted a significant change in your life, perhaps a new diet, a new exercise routine, or a new approach to your work. If you're like most people, you probably experienced an initial period of excitement and progress, followed by a powerful gravitational pull back to your old patterns. This pull isn't a sign of weakness or lack of motivation. It's your comfort zone doing exactly what it's designed to do, maintaining stability and preserving energy by sticking with known patterns, even if those patterns don't serve your conscious goals. Understanding this dynamic changes how you approach transformation. Instead of relying on motivation or willpower to push against this biological resistance, you can develop strategies that work with your natural tendencies rather than against them. One such strategy is what I call comfort zone expansion rather than comfort zone destruction. The idea is to gradually extend the boundaries of what feels comfortable rather than forcing yourself into a state of perpetual discomfort. Here's how it works. Identify a behavior just beyond the edge of your comfort zone, something that creates mild anxiety but not panic. Practice this behavior regularly until your nervous system recognizes it as safe. Then identify a slightly more challenging behavior and repeat the process. For example, if public speaking terrifies you, don't start by agreeing to give a TED talk. Start by speaking up in a small meeting with colleagues you trust. Once that feels manageable, volunteer to present to a slightly larger group. Gradually increase the stakes as your comfort zone expands to include each new level of challenge. This gradual approach honors the reality of how your nervous system works while still creating meaningful change over time. It's like acclimatizing to high altitude. Going too high too quickly leads to failure, but a gradual ascent allows your body to adapt. Of course, there are times when a more dramatic break from your comfort zone is necessary. Major life transitions, significant career changes, or profound personal transformations sometimes require you to leap into uncertainty rather than inching forward incrementally. In these cases, it's essential to have strategies for managing the inevitable discomfort. These might include creating stability in other areas of your life, developing robust self-regulation skills, and building a support system that can help you navigate the turbulence of major change. We'll explore these strategies in detail in later chapters. For now, simply recognize that your comfort zone isn't your enemy. It's a biological system trying to keep you safe. Working with this system rather than against it is key to sustainable transformation. Now, let's address perhaps the most pervasive obstacle to personal transformation, the belief that your past determines your future. Most of us carry an implicit assumption that our future will be a slightly modified version of our past. We believe that our existing patterns, limitations, and circumstances create boundaries around what's possible for us. This assumption is so deeply embedded that we don't even recognize it as a belief. It feels like reality itself. And as long as this assumption remains unchallenged, true transformation will remain elusive. The truth is that your past does not determine your future. It influences your future. It shapes your current perspective. It has created patterns that, left unexamined, will likely continue, but it does not define what's possible for you going forward. Consider the story of Oprah Winfrey, who was born into poverty, survived sexual abuse, and experienced racial discrimination, yet went on to become one of the most influential and successful people in media. Or the story of Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison before emerging to lead South Africa toward reconciliation rather than revenge. These individuals didn't allow their past to define their future. They recognized that while their experiences shaped them, they didn't have to be limited by those experiences. The same is true for you. Whatever your past contains, failures or successes, traumas or privileges, setbacks or advantages, it does not dictate what you can become. It's raw material for your transformation, not a limitation on it. This understanding is liberating. It means that your history of procrastination doesn't mean you're doomed to always procrastinate. Your past relationship failures don't mean you're incapable of healthy, fulfilling connections. Your financial struggles don't mean you're destined for scarcity. To internalize this truth, try this exercise. Identify a limiting pattern in your life, something you've struggled with consistently. Now, instead of seeing this pattern as evidence of who you are, reframe it as a strategy you've been using, a strategy that can be replaced with a more effective one. For example, instead of thinking, "I'm a procrastinator," try, "I've been using procrastination as a strategy to manage my fear of failure." Instead of "I'm bad with money," try, "I've been using avoidance as a strategy to deal with financial anxiety." This reframing is subtle but powerful. It shifts your perspective from fixed identity, "Fifth, this is who I am," to flexible strategy, "Fifth, this is what I've been doing." And while it's very difficult to change who you are, it's entirely possible to change what you do. As we conclude this chapter on confronting your current reality, I want to acknowledge that this process can be emotionally challenging. Facing the unfiltered truth about yourself, your patterns, limitations, and the gap between where you are and where you want to be, requires courage and resilience. You may encounter difficult emotions along the way, shame about past failures, regret about missed opportunities, anger about the circumstances or conditioning that shaped you. These emotions are a natural part of the process. Don't try to suppress or avoid them. Instead, see them as evidence that you're engaging honestly with your reality rather than hiding from it. Remember, the goal isn't to judge your current reality, but to see it clearly. Clarity, not criticism, is what you're seeking. And clarity, even when initially painful, is ultimately empowering. By completing the exercises in this chapter, the brutal mirror exercise, identifying your self-limiting patterns, understanding your comfort zone, and recognizing that your past doesn't determine your future, you've laid the foundation for profound transformation. You've created a map of your current territory, an honest assessment of where you stand right now, without the distortions of denial or wishful thinking. This map is invaluable. Without it, you'd be navigating blindly, making changes based on incomplete or inaccurate information. But a map, no matter how accurate, is just the beginning. It shows you where you are, but not how to move forward. That's where we're headed next. In the next section, we'll move from awareness to action. We'll explore how to strategically dismantle the aspects of yourself that no longer serve you, to break down the old, to make way for the new. We'll examine the process of identity excavation, separating your essential self from the conditioned behaviors and beliefs that have accumulated around it. You'll learn how to give yourself permission to fail, to embrace the productive discomfort that accompanies growth. You'll discover techniques for releasing the emotional anchors that keep you tethered to past hurts and limiting narratives. And you'll develop the skills to deconstruct the false stories you've been telling yourself about who you are and what you're capable of. This process of demolition isn't about self-destruction. It's about strategic deconstruction, carefully removing what's in the way of your evolution. It's like a sculptor removing the excess marble to reveal the masterpiece within. So take a moment to acknowledge the work you've done in this chapter. You've had the courage to look honestly at yourself, to see both your current limitations and your untapped potential. This willingness to face reality without flinching is the first and perhaps most crucial step in your journey of transformation. Now, let's move forward to the work of breaking down what no longer serves you, so you can begin building the extraordinary life you're capable of creating. Now, let's move forward to the work of breaking down what no longer serves you, so you can begin building the extraordinary life you're capable of creating. Have you ever watched a building being demolished? It's a fascinating process. Before the explosives are set, before the wrecking balls swing, a team of engineers studies the structure carefully. They identify load-bearing walls, map out electrical systems, and determine precisely where to place the charges for a controlled collapse. The demolition isn't random. It's strategic, calculated, and precise. It's not destruction for destruction's sake. It's clearing space for something new. The demolition phase of personal transformation works in exactly the same way. It's not about tearing yourself down indiscriminately or engaging in harsh self-criticism. It's about strategically identifying and dismantling the aspects of your identity that are limiting your growth. This process begins with what I call identity excavation, separating your core self from the conditioned behaviors and beliefs that have accumulated around it. Your core self is who you are beneath all the socialization, conditioning, and adaptations you've developed to navigate the world. It's the essence of you, your fundamental values, natural talents, and authentic interests. It's what remains when all the shoulds, musts, and expectations are stripped away. Most of us have lost touch with this core self. We've been so busy becoming who we think we should be, or who others expect us to be, that we've forgotten who we actually are. Think about it. How many of your daily choices are made based on genuine preference versus social expectation or habitual pattern? What parts of your life feel authentically yours, and what parts feel like you're playing a role? Where do you feel most alive, most engaged, most present, and where do you feel like you're just going through the motions? These questions begin to excavate your core self from the layers of conditioning that have buried it. Let me tell you about David, a successful corporate attorney who came to me in a state of achievement-induced misery. By all external measures, David had succeeded. He had the corner office, the impressive salary, the professional respect, but inside he felt hollow. Through our work together, David realized that his entire career path had been shaped by his father's expectations. As the son of a blue-collar worker who had struggled financially, David had absorbed the message that financial security was the ultimate goal, even if it meant sacrificing personal fulfillment. David's identity as a high-powered attorney wasn't authentic to his core self. It was a response to childhood conditioning, a strategy he had developed to ensure he never experienced the financial insecurity his father had faced. When David finally gave himself permission to explore his genuine interests, he discovered a passion for environmental conservation that had been dormant since childhood. Within 2 years, he had transitioned to environmental law, a field that allowed him to use his legal training in service of something he genuinely cared about. David's story illustrates an important truth. Many of the identities we inhabit aren't consciously chosen. They're inherited, absorbed, or adopted as protective strategies. Recognizing this is the first step in reclaiming the power to define yourself on your own terms. To begin your own identity excavation, try this exercise. Take a sheet of paper and draw a line down the middle. On the left side, list the aspects of your life and identity that feel genuinely chosen, things you do, believe, or value because they resonate with your authentic self. On the right side, list the aspects that feel inherited, expected, or developed as adaptations to external circumstances. Be brutally honest here. You might discover that much of what you consider you falls into the second category, chosen not by your authentic self, but by the conditioning you've received or the strategies you've developed to navigate your environment. This realization can be unsettling. It might feel like you're losing your sense of self, but in reality, you're beginning to distinguish between your authentic identity and the adaptive strategies you've confused with identity. Think of it this way: you are not your strategies, you are not your adaptations, you are not the roles you play. These are things you do, not who you are, and anything you've learned to do, you can unlearn or choose to continue doing from a place of conscious choice rather than unconscious conditioning. This brings us to a crucial insight. Identity is not fixed, it's fluid, dynamic, and most importantly, chosen. You can consciously author your identity rather than passively inheriting it or unconsciously constructing it in response to circumstances. But to do that, you must first give yourself permission to release the aspects of your current identity that no longer serve you. And this is where many people get stuck. We develop deep attachments to our identities, even the ones that limit us. These attachments create a form of psychological inertia that resists change, even when our current identity causes us suffering. Why? Because identity, even a limiting one, provides a sense of certainty. It tells us who we are, how we should behave, and what we can expect from life. It creates a framework that makes the world feel predictable and manageable. Releasing this framework, even temporarily, triggers existential anxiety. If I'm not who I've always thought I was, then who am I? If I let go of my familiar patterns, what will replace them? These questions create a vertigo-like sensation that most people instinctively avoid. But this avoidance comes at a devastating cost, a life constrained by outdated identities that were formed reactively rather than chosen deliberately. To counter this avoidance, you must develop what I call identity flexibility, the ability to hold your self-concept lightly rather than clinging to it rigidly. This flexibility allows you to try on new ways of being without the pressure of permanent commitment. Think of it as trying on a new outfit. You wouldn't refuse to enter a dressing room unless you were already certain the clothes would look good on you. You try them on, see how they feel, and decide based on that experience whether they're right for you. Identity exploration works the same way. You can try on new ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving without having to commit to them permanently. You can experiment with different aspects of yourself in a spirit of curiosity rather than with the pressure of permanent identity change. This experimental approach reduces the anxiety associated with identity transformation. Instead of thinking, "I'm completely reinventing myself," which triggers existential panic, you can think, "I'm exploring new possibilities for who I might become," which feels adventurous rather than threatening. Now, let's talk about another crucial aspect of the demolition phase, giving yourself permission to fail. Most of us have been conditioned to avoid failure at all costs. We've been taught that failure is evidence of inadequacy rather than a necessary component of growth. This conditioning creates a paralyzing fear that prevents us from taking the risks required for transformation. But here's the reality. Failure isn't just an occasional side effect of the transformation process. It's an essential ingredient. You cannot transform without failing. You cannot become a new version of yourself without experiencing the discomfort of doing things badly before you learn to do them well. Think about a child learning to walk. They fall hundreds of times before they master the skill, but we don't consider those falls to be failures. We recognize them as necessary steps in the learning process. Somehow, as adults, we lose this understanding. We expect ourselves to master new skills, behaviors, and ways of being without the messy process of falling and getting back up. This expectation is not only unrealistic, it's debilitating. To counter this, you must consciously give yourself permission to fail as you dismantle your old identity and experiment with new ways of being. This permission isn't a one-time event, but a daily practice of reminding yourself that failure is not just acceptable but necessary for growth. I recommend a simple ritual. Each morning say to yourself, "Today, I give myself permission to fail as I explore new ways of being." Each failure brings me closer to mastery. This simple practice begins to rewire your relationship with failure, transforming it from something to be avoided into a valued teacher. Let me tell you about Elena, a perfectionist who had spent decades avoiding any situation where she might fail publicly. This avoidance had kept her in a job far below her capabilities and prevented her from pursuing romantic relationships that might end in rejection. When Elena began giving herself explicit permission to fail, something remarkable happened. She started small, volunteering an opinion in a team meeting, even though she wasn't 100% certain it was correct. She asked a question in a workshop, even though she feared it might be perceived as stupid. She initiated a conversation with someone she found attractive, knowing it might not lead anywhere. None of these actions transformed her life overnight, but they began to weaken the grip that fear of failure had on her identity. With each small risk, each minor failure, and each recovery, Elena was proving to herself that failure wasn't fatal. It was informative. Over time, these small experiments led to bigger ones. Elena applied for a position that stretched her capabilities. She entered a relationship that required emotional vulnerability. She started a side business that had no guarantee of success. Some of these experiments succeeded, others failed. But Elena herself didn't feel like a failure regardless of the outcome, because she had separated her identity from her results. She had learned that failure is something you experience, not something you are. This distinction between experiencing failure and being a failure is crucial to the demolition phase of transformation. As long as you believe that failure defines you, that it's evidence of who you are, rather than simply what happened, you'll be too terrified to take the risks required for genuine transformation. But when you give yourself permission to fail, when you expect failure as part of the process, rather than hoping to avoid it, you free yourself to experiment boldly with new ways of being. Now let's address another critical aspect of demolition: releasing emotional anchors, the unresolved hurts, resentments, and painful experiences that keep you tethered to your past self. These emotional anchors operate beneath conscious awareness, influencing your decisions and behaviors in ways you don't recognize. They create reactive patterns that repeat automatically whenever you encounter situations that resemble past hurts. For example, if you were betrayed by someone close to you, you might develop a pattern of preemptive distrust in all relationships. If you were criticized harshly for a creative effort, you might develop a pattern of hiding your work or never finishing projects. If you experienced financial insecurity, you might develop patterns of scarcity, even when surrounded by abundance. These patterns aren't random. They're protective strategies developed in response to painful experiences. At the time they formed, they may have been necessary for your emotional survival, but now they're limiting your growth and preventing you from becoming who you're capable of being. Releasing these emotional anchors doesn't mean denying or suppressing your past experiences. It means processing them fully so they no longer control your present choices. It means extracting the wisdom they contain without remaining bound by the emotional charge they carry. There are many approaches to this kind of emotional release work: therapy, somatic practices, journaling, meditation, and various healing modalities. The specific method matters less than the commitment to facing and processing your emotional anchors rather than continuing to avoid them. One practice I've found particularly effective is what I call compassionate witnessing. This involves bringing mindful awareness to the physical sensations, emotions, and thoughts associated with a painful memory, not to relive the trauma, but to witness it with the compassionate perspective of your present self. Here's how it works. Choose a painful experience that you believe may be creating a limiting pattern in your life. Find a quiet space where you won't be interrupted. Close your eyes and bring the experience to mind, noticing where you feel it in your body. Rather than being swept away by the emotions or captured by the narrative, maintain a witnessing presence, observing the experience as it moves through you. As you witness, extend compassion to yourself as you were during that experience. Recognize that you were doing the best you could with the resources you had available. See if you can identify what this experience taught you, what wisdom or strength you gained from it. Finally, ask yourself, what would be possible in my life if I were no longer defined by this experience? How might I behave differently if this emotional anchor were released? This practice doesn't erase painful memories or magically dissolve their emotional impact overnight, but with repetition, it gradually transforms your relationship to these experiences. They become part of your story rather than the defining factor in your identity. Think of it like this: your past experiences are like the soil you grew from. They provided nutrients that shaped your development, but you are not the soil, you are what has grown from it. And you can choose to draw different nutrients from that soil as you continue to grow. Now let's examine perhaps the most subtle but powerful aspect of the demolition phase: deconstructing the false narratives you tell yourself about who you are and what you're capable of. We all create stories about ourselves, narratives that explain our successes and failures, our relationships, our place in the world. These narratives aren't objective reflections of reality. They're interpretations, meaning-making structures that help us make sense of our experiences. Some of these narratives serve us well. They provide meaning, direction, and resilience in the face of challenges. But many of them limit us unnecessarily, constraining our actions and dampening our aspirations. The most dangerous narratives are the ones we don't recognize as stories. We confuse them with reality itself. We say this is just how I am, or this is just how life works, without realizing we're reciting lines from a script we've unconsciously written. These limiting narratives often contain absolute language: always, never, everyone, no one, impossible, hopeless. They present subjective interpretations as objective facts, and they typically go unquestioned because they feel like truth rather than perspective. For example, a narrative like "I always freeze under pressure" feels like an observation of reality, but it's actually an interpretation of specific experiences that ignores contrary evidence and creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. To deconstruct these limiting narratives, you must first develop the capacity to recognize them as stories rather than facts. This requires what psychologists call cognitive diffusion, the ability to separate yourself from your thoughts and observe them objectively. A simple practice for developing this capacity is to notice when you're using absolute language about yourself or your capabilities. Whenever you catch yourself thinking or saying phrases like "I always," "I never," "I can't," or "that's impossible for me," pause and add the phrase "I'm telling myself the story that" before the statement. For example, if you notice yourself thinking "I'll never be good at public speaking," reframe it as "I'm telling myself the story that I'll never be good at public speaking." This small shift creates space between you and the narrative, allowing you to question its validity rather than accepting it as truth. Once you've created this space, you can begin to examine the evidence for and against your limiting narrative. What experiences have you had that seem to confirm this story? What experiences contradict it? Are there alternative interpretations of these experiences that might be equally valid? This examination often reveals that your limiting narratives are based on selective evidence. You've focused on experiences that confirm your story while ignoring those that contradict it. This selective attention creates a false sense of certainty about limitations that may not actually exist. Let me share a powerful example from my work with Robert, a mid-career professional who believed he lacked the intelligence to advance beyond middle management. This narrative had kept him from pursuing opportunities for advancement despite his strong work performance. When we examined the evidence for Robert's "not smart enough" narrative, we discovered it was built almost entirely on his struggle with mathematics in high school and college. He had generalized this specific challenge into a global belief about his intelligence that ignored substantial evidence to the contrary: his success in other academic subjects, his ability to solve complex problems at work, and the respect he commanded from colleagues. As Robert began to recognize this narrative as a story rather than a fact, he could see how it had shaped his career choices. He had avoided roles that seemed too intellectual, turned down opportunities for advanced training, and even adopted speech patterns that downplayed his intelligence to match his self-concept. With this awareness, Robert could begin to construct a new narrative, one that acknowledged his specific challenge with certain types of mathematical thinking, while recognizing his strengths in other cognitive domains. This new narrative didn't claim he was a genius. It simply offered a more balanced and accurate assessment of his capabilities. The shift in Robert's self-concept led naturally to changes in his behavior. He began volunteering for challenging projects, pursuing professional development opportunities, and speaking with more confidence in meetings. Within 18 months, he had been promoted to a senior leadership position, a role his old narrative would have made unthinkable. Robert's story illustrates a critical point: Your narratives shape your reality, not because they're true, but because they guide your actions. Change the narrative, and you change the actions that flow from it. This insight leads us to a powerful approach for deconstructing limiting narratives, acting as if a new narrative were true, and collecting evidence based on your experience. Instead of trying to believe a new story about yourself through positive thinking or affirmations which rarely work at a deep level, you can design small experiments to test whether your limiting narrative actually predicts your experience. For example, if your narrative is "I'm not a creative person," you might design an experiment where you engage in a creative activity for 30 minutes each day for 2 weeks, with no expectation of producing anything good. The goal isn't to become an artist overnight, but to collect evidence about whether your experience matches your narrative. Often these experiments reveal that your limiting narratives are far less accurate than they seem. You discover capabilities, enjoyments, and strengths that your old story insisted couldn't exist, and these discoveries begin to crack the foundation of your limiting identity. Over time, as evidence accumulates that contradicts your limiting narratives, new narratives naturally emerge, not as forced positive thinking, but as more accurate reflections of your expanding experience. These new narratives in turn make possible actions and choices that were inconceivable under your old identity. This brings us to a fundamental truth about identity transformation. Your identity is not something you think your way into, it's something you act your way into. New ways of being emerge from new ways of doing, not the other way around. Most people approach transformation backward. They try to change their thoughts and feelings first, hoping that new behaviors will follow naturally. But this approach rarely works, because thoughts and feelings are deeply entrenched in neural pathways built through years of repetition. A more effective approach is to change your behaviors first, even if your thoughts and feelings haven't caught up. This behavioral approach creates new experiences that gradually shift your thoughts and feelings over time. For example, if you want to develop an identity as someone who's physically fit, don't wait until you feel motivated or confident. Start with the behavior, exercise consistently, even when you don't feel like it. Over time, as you experience the results of this behavior, your thoughts and feelings will align with your new identity. This approach, acting as if you're already the person you want to become, isn't pretending or fake it till you make it. It's strategic identity reconstruction through deliberate behavioral change. Think of it this way: if identity is largely a collection of habitual patterns, then changing those patterns is the most direct route to changing your identity. New habits create new neural pathways, which eventually become the foundation for a new self-concept. This behavioral approach to identity change is powerful because it bypasses the limitations of conscious thought. Your conscious mind can entertain new ideas about who you might become, but your unconscious mind, which largely governs your behavior, learns through experience, not intellectual understanding. By engaging in new behaviors consistently, you're educating your unconscious mind through direct experience. You're showing, rather than telling it, who you're becoming. Now I want to address a common concern about this demolition phase, the fear that by dismantling aspects of your current identity, you'll lose yourself entirely. That without your familiar patterns, beliefs, and narratives, you'll be left with nothing, an empty shell without definition or direction. This fear is understandable but misplaced. The demolition phase isn't about destroying your essential self. It's about clearing away the accumulated layers that obscure it. It's not about becoming no one. It's about creating space to become who you truly are beneath the conditioning. Think of it like restoring an old painting that's been covered with layers of dust and grime. The cleaning process doesn't destroy the painting. it reveals its original beauty and detail. Similarly, identity excavation doesn't erase you, it reveals aspects of yourself that have been hidden beneath limiting patterns and false narratives. In fact, many people report feeling more authentically themselves after this process, as if they've returned to a core identity that was always there, but had been buried under years of adaptation and conditioning. As we conclude this demolition phase, I want to acknowledge that this work can feel disorienting at times. When you've been identified with certain patterns, beliefs, and narratives for decades, their dismantling can create a temporary sense of groundlessness, like the moment between trapeze bars, when you've let go of one, but haven't yet grasped the next. This groundlessness is not a problem to be solved, but a necessary stage in the transformation process. It's the space between identities, the fertile void from which new possibilities emerge. The key is to develop tolerance for this in-between state, to recognize that the discomfort it creates is not a signal that something's wrong, but evidence that something significant is happening. The caterpillar feels similar disorientation as it dissolves into goo within the chrysalis, yet this dissolution is precisely what makes the butterfly possible. In the next section, we'll explore how to navigate this in-between space effectively. We'll examine the process of reconstruction, how to strategically build a new identity that aligns with your deepest values and highest aspirations. You'll learn techniques for vision casting that pull you toward your new identity rather than pushing you away from your old one. You'll discover how to create a coherent framework for your new self that provides direction without rigidity. And you'll develop strategies for engineering daily systems that reinforce your emerging identity until it becomes your new normal. But for now, I invite you to honor the work you've done in this demolition phase, to recognize the courage it takes to question long-held beliefs about who you are and what you're capable of, to acknowledge the strength required to release emotional anchors that have defined your experience for years or even decades. This work of strategic deconstruction is not destruction, it's preparation. Like a field that must be cleared before new crops can be planted, your identity must be excavated of limiting patterns before a more empowered version of yourself can emerge. The space you're creating through this process is sacred. It represents potential possibility, freedom from outdated constraints. It's the starting point for the extraordinary life you're now preparing to build. So take a moment to appreciate this space, to feel the openness and possibility it contains. This is the canvas on which you'll create the next version of yourself. And in the section that follows, we'll begin the exciting work of filling this canvas with a vision and framework for who you're about to become. Have you ever stood at the edge of transformation, knowing that everything you've been through has led to this pivotal moment? The moment when you begin to rebuild yourself, piece by piece, stronger than before. In our journey together, we've traveled through the darkness of destruction, where old habits and limiting beliefs were dismantled. We've navigated the uncertain waters of the void, where possibilities existed in potential but had not yet taken form. And now we arrive at perhaps the most exciting phase of all, reconstruction. This is where intention meets action, where dreams become reality, where the phoenix truly rises from the ashes. The reconstruction phase isn't merely about returning to who you were before. It's about intentionally designing who you're becoming. Think of yourself as both the architect and the building. You draw the blueprints of your future self, and then you lay each brick with deliberate care. When we look at those who have undergone profound transformations, whether recovering from addiction, rebuilding after loss, or reinventing their careers, we notice a common thread. They don't simply drift into their new lives. They construct them with purpose. Consider Sarah, who after 20 years in corporate finance found herself empty despite her success. During her destruction phase, she released her attachment to status and security. In the void, she reconnected with her childhood passion for teaching. Now in reconstruction, she's not just dreaming about becoming an educator, she's enrolled in certification programs, volunteering at schools, and building connections in her new field. Each action is a brick in her new foundation. Reconstruction requires 3 essential elements: vision, strategy, and consistent action. Let's explore each one. First, vision. Your vision is the blueprint of your reconstruction. Without it, you're simply building without direction. Your vision should be vivid, detailed, and emotionally compelling. It should pull you forward on days when motivation wanes. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine your reconstructed self. What are you doing? How do you feel in your body? What relationships surround you? What values guide your decisions? Make this vision so clear that you could walk around in it, touch the surfaces of this new reality. The most powerful visions engage all senses. They're not just mental pictures, but full sensory experiences. When Olympic athletes visualize their performance, they don't just see themselves completing their event. They feel their muscles engaging, hear the crowd, smell the environment, taste the anticipation. Your reconstruction vision works the same way. The more sensory details you include, the more real it becomes to your subconscious mind, which doesn't distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and actual ones. Now, strategy. If vision is your destination, strategy is your roadmap. This is where many people falter in their transformation journey. They have beautiful visions, but no practical plan to achieve them. Effective strategy breaks down your grand vision into manageable stages. It anticipates obstacles and prepares solutions. It identifies resources you'll need and skills you must develop. Let's return to Sarah, our finance executive turned teacher. Her strategy included researching certification requirements, saving enough to support herself during the transition, finding mentors in education, and creating a timeline for her career change. Without this strategy, her vision might have remained just a dream. For your reconstruction, create milestones that serve as checkpoints on your journey. These provide both guidance and the satisfaction of measurable progress. Your ultimate vision might take years to fully realize, but well-crafted milestones give you victories to celebrate along the way. And finally, consistent action. This is where reconstruction truly happens, in the daily choices and habits that gradually build your new reality. Neuroscience shows us that consistent action literally rewires our brains. Each time you act in alignment with your vision, you strengthen neural pathways that support your new identity. What begins as conscious effort eventually becomes your natural way of being. The power of consistent action lies not in its intensity, but in its regularity. Small daily actions aligned with your vision create more lasting transformation than occasional heroic efforts. Take Marcus, who rebuilt his health after years of neglect. It wasn't a month-long fitness boot camp that transformed him. It was walking 20 minutes every morning, preparing healthy meals on Sundays for the week ahead, and meditating for 5 minutes before bed. These modest but consistent actions, maintained over months, completely reconstructed his relationship with his body. During reconstruction, you'll encounter resistance, both internal and external. Internal resistance might manifest as the voice of doubt, questioning whether you're capable of this transformation. External resistance might come from people accustomed to your former self, uncomfortable with your changes. Remember that resistance is actually a positive sign. It means you're stretching beyond your comfort zone, which is precisely where growth happens. The presence of resistance doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. Quite the opposite. It signals you're doing something significant. When resistance arises, return to your vision. Let it remind you why this reconstruction matters. Connect with the emotional power of becoming the person you're designed to be. An often overlooked aspect of reconstruction is community. Humans are social creatures, and our transformations flourish with support. Seek out others who are on similar journeys or who embody qualities you're developing. Their presence serves as both inspiration and affirmation that your vision is possible. These communities might be formal or informal. They might be local groups, online forums, or accountability partnerships. The format matters less than the function, providing encouragement, perspective, and the reminder that you're not alone in your reconstruction. Elena found her community in a weekly writers group when reconstructing her identity as an author after years of believing creativity was a luxury she couldn't afford. The group's feedback improved her writing, but more importantly, their recognition of her as a writer strengthened her new self-concept before she had published a single word. As you rebuild, celebrate each evidence of your emerging identity. These celebrations aren't frivolous, they're fuel for continued transformation. Our brains are wired to repeat behaviors that bring rewards. By acknowledging your progress, you create positive reinforcement that sustains your momentum. Some reconstructions require grieving what's being left behind. Even positive transformations involve loss of familiar routines, relationships that no longer fit, or identities that once defined you. Honor these losses. Thank them for what they taught you. This acknowledgement creates emotional space for your new self to emerge fully. In reconstruction, patience becomes a crucial virtue. We live in a culture obsessed with immediate results, but meaningful transformation unfolds in its own time. The oak doesn't rush to reach its full height, yet it never stops growing. The timeline of your reconstruction isn't measured in days or months, but in commitment. Some aspects may transform quickly, while others evolve over years. The question isn't how long will this take, but rather, am I moving consistently in my chosen direction? Consider how reconstruction manifests in different life domains. In relationships, it might mean establishing new boundaries, cultivating deeper vulnerability, or developing communication skills that create greater connection. In career, it could involve acquiring expertise, building a professional network, or aligning your work with your core values. In well-being, reconstruction might focus on establishing rhythms of rest, movement, and nourishment that support your vitality. While these domains may seem separate, they're interconnected in the ecosystem of your life. A reconstruction in one area inevitably influences others. As you rebuild your physical health, you'll likely notice changes in your mental clarity and emotional resilience. As you transform your relationship patterns, your professional interactions often evolve similarly. This interconnection can work to your advantage through what psychologists call keystone habits, practices that create positive ripple effects across multiple life areas. For instance, consistent sleep routines often improve decision-making, emotional regulation, and physical health. By identifying and focusing on your keystone habits, you can leverage their transformative power throughout your reconstruction. A powerful tool in the reconstruction phase is the practice of embodiment, consciously inhabiting your emerging identity before it feels completely natural. This isn't pretending or inauthentic posturing. Rather, it's a recognition that identity forms through action, not the other way around. The writer doesn't wait until some magical moment of feeling like a writer before putting words on the page. The leader doesn't wait to feel confident before making decisions. They write and lead first, and through these actions become writers and leaders. Similarly, in your reconstruction, find ways to embody your vision now. If part of your new identity involves being more expressive, start expressing yourself in small, safe contexts. If you're rebuilding as someone who prioritizes creativity, Schedule even 10 minutes of creative practice daily. These acts of embodiment gradually dissolve the gap between who you're becoming and who you believe yourself to be. During reconstruction, you'll encounter what I call threshold moments, crossroads where you must choose between retreating to the familiar or advancing into your emerging reality. These thresholds often trigger fear, as they require stepping beyond the boundaries of your established identity. When you recognize a threshold moment, approach it with both courage and discernment. Not every opportunity aligned with your vision should be pursued, but each deserves conscious consideration rather than reactive rejection. Thresholds are where transformation accelerates. Each time you choose to step through, rather than turn back, you expand your capacity for growth. You demonstrate to yourself that you're committed to your reconstruction, regardless of discomfort. An essential practice during reconstruction is the regular refinement of your vision. As you grow, your understanding of what you're creating will naturally evolve. What seemed desirable at the beginning of your journey might lose its appeal as you gain clarity about your authentic desires. This refinement isn't failure or inconsistency, it's wisdom. It's the natural calibration that occurs as you gather experience and deepen self-knowledge. Allow your vision the space to mature without abandoning the core values driving your transformation. In this phase, language becomes particularly powerful. The words you use, both in communication with others and in your internal dialogue, either reinforce or undermine your reconstruction. Notice whether you speak of your changes in tentative, uncertain terms or with quiet confidence. Do you describe yourself according to old patterns or in alignment with your emerging identity? Intentionally shift your language to support your transformation. This isn't about affirmations detached from reality, but about acknowledging the truth of your becoming. Instead of "I'm trying to be more confident," experiment with "I'm developing confidence daily." Instead of "I hope to become a writer," try "I am writing consistently, building my craft." As reconstruction progresses, you'll experience integration, the harmonizing of your new identity with the wholeness of your life experience. Integration doesn't mean rejecting your past or pretending previous versions of yourself didn't exist. Rather, it means recognizing how each chapter of your story, including difficult ones, contributes to the wisdom you now embody. Integration appears when your transformation no longer feels like a separate project, but simply the natural expression of who you are. The habits that initially required conscious effort now flow with ease. The perspectives that once seemed revolutionary have become your default way of seeing. The most profound reconstructions ultimately lead beyond personal transformation to contribution. As you rebuild yourself, you develop insights, capabilities, and compassion that position you to serve others navigating similar terrain. Consider how many effective mentors, healers, and teachers were first students of the very wisdom they now share. Their reconstruction prepared them to guide others, not from theoretical understanding but lived experience. As you continue your reconstruction, remain open to how your journey might benefit others. Your transformation is uniquely yours, but its impact need not be limited to your life alone. Remember that reconstruction isn't a linear process. You'll experience plateaus where progress seems stalled, breakthroughs where everything accelerates, and occasional setbacks that test your resolve. Throughout these variations, maintain flexibility in your approach while remaining steadfast in your commitment. True mastery in reconstruction comes not from avoiding challenges, but from developing resilience to move through them. Each obstacle overcome further confirms that you're capable of this transformation, that you are in fact already embodying it through your persistent choice to continue. The beauty of reconstruction lies in its creative nature.
Unlike biological growth, which follows predetermined patterns, personal transformation allows for artistic expression. You are simultaneously the sculptor and the marble, shaping yourself according to your deepest values and highest aspirations.
Consider how reconstruction manifests in different life domains. In relationships, it might mean establishing new boundaries, cultivating deeper vulnerability, or developing communication skills that create greater connection. In career, it could involve acquiring expertise, building a professional network, or aligning your work with your core values. In well-being, reconstruction might focus on establishing rhythms of rest, movement, and nourishment that support your vitality. While these domains may seem separate, they're interconnected in the ecosystem of your life. A reconstruction in one area inevitably influences others. As you rebuild your physical health, you'll likely notice changes in your mental clarity and emotional resilience. As you transform your relationship patterns, your professional interactions often evolve similarly. This interconnection can work to your advantage through what psychologists call keystone habits, practices that create positive ripple effects across multiple life areas. For instance, consistent sleep routines often improve decision-making, emotional regulation, and physical health. By identifying and focusing on your keystone habits, you can leverage their transformative power throughout your reconstruction. A powerful tool in the reconstruction phase is the practice of embodiment, consciously inhabiting your emerging identity before it feels completely natural. This isn't pretending or inauthentic posturing. Rather, it's a recognition that identity forms through action, not the other way around. The writer doesn't wait until some magical moment of feeling like a writer before putting words on the page. The leader doesn't wait to feel confident before making decisions. They write and lead first, and through these actions become writers and leaders. Similarly, in your reconstruction, find ways to embody your vision now. If part of your new identity involves being more expressive, start expressing yourself in small, safe contexts. If you're rebuilding as someone who prioritizes creativity, schedule even 10 minutes of creative practice daily. These acts of embodiment gradually dissolve the gap between who you're becoming and who you believe yourself to be. During reconstruction, you'll encounter what I call threshold moments, crossroads where you must choose between retreating to the familiar or advancing into your emerging reality. These thresholds often trigger fear, as they require stepping beyond the boundaries of your established identity. When you recognize a threshold moment, approach it with both courage and discernment. Not every opportunity aligned with your vision should be pursued, but each deserves conscious consideration rather than reactive rejection. Thresholds are where transformation accelerates. Each time you choose to step through rather than turn back, you expand your capacity for growth. You demonstrate to yourself that you're committed to your reconstruction, regardless of discomfort. An essential practice during reconstruction is the regular refinement of your vision. As you grow, your understanding of what you're creating will naturally evolve. What seemed desirable at the beginning of your journey might lose its appeal as you gain clarity about your authentic desires. This refinement isn't failure or inconsistency, it's wisdom. It's the natural calibration that occurs as you gather experience and deepen self-knowledge. Allow your vision the space to mature without abandoning the core values driving your transformation. In this phase, language becomes particularly powerful. The words you use, both in communication with others and in your internal dialogue, either reinforce or undermine your reconstruction. Notice whether you speak of your changes in tentative, uncertain terms or with quiet confidence. Do you describe yourself according to old patterns or in alignment with your emerging identity?
Intentionally shift your language to support your transformation. This isn't about affirmations detached from reality, but about acknowledging the truth of your becoming. Instead of "I'm trying to be more confident," experiment with "I'm developing confidence daily." Instead of "I hope to become a writer," try "I am writing consistently, building my craft." As reconstruction progresses, you'll experience integration, the harmonizing of your new identity with the wholeness of your life experience. Integration doesn't mean rejecting your past or pretending previous versions of yourself didn't exist. Rather, it means recognizing how each chapter of your story, including difficult ones, contributes to the wisdom you now embody. Integration appears when your transformation no longer feels like a separate project, but simply the natural expression of who you are. The habits that initially required conscious effort now flow with ease. The perspectives that once seemed revolutionary have become your default way of seeing. The most profound reconstructions ultimately lead beyond personal transformation to contribution. As you rebuild yourself, you develop insights, capabilities, and compassion that position you to serve others navigating similar terrain. Consider how many effective mentors, healers, and teachers were first students of the very wisdom they now share. Their reconstruction prepared them to guide others, not from theoretical understanding but lived experience. As you continue your reconstruction, remain open to how your journey might benefit others. Your transformation is uniquely yours, but its impact need not be limited to your life alone. Remember that reconstruction isn't a linear process. You'll experience plateaus where progress seems stalled, breakthroughs where everything accelerates, and occasional setbacks that test your resolve. Throughout these variations, maintain flexibility in your approach while remaining steadfast in your commitment. True mastery in reconstruction comes not from avoiding challenges, but from developing resilience to move through them. Each obstacle overcome further confirms that you're capable of this transformation, that you are in fact already embodying it through your persistent choice to continue. The beauty of reconstruction lies in its creative nature. Unlike biological growth, which follows predetermined patterns, personal transformation allows for artistic expression. You are simultaneously the sculptor and the marble, shaping yourself according to your deepest values and highest aspirations.
This creative dimension invites you to approach reconstruction with both discipline and playfulness. Discipline provides the consistent structure needed for lasting change. Playfulness brings the joy and experimentation that keeps your journey vibrant rather than burdensome. As we conclude our exploration of the reconstruction phase, I invite you to reflect on what you're building now. What aspects of yourself are under construction? What vision guides this process? What daily actions are laying the foundation of your emerging reality? Remember that transformation is your birthright. You were designed with the capacity to grow, change, and evolve throughout your lifetime. The question isn't whether you can reconstruct yourself. You absolutely can. The question is what you will choose to build. In the quiet moments when doubt surfaces or motivation wanes, return to this truth. Reconstruction isn't about becoming someone else, it's about becoming more fully yourself. Clearing away what doesn't belong and cultivating what authentically does. Your reconstruction journey continues beyond these words. Each choice ahead is another opportunity to align with your vision, another brick in the foundation of your emerging self. And though this path requires courage and persistence, it offers rewards beyond measure, the profound satisfaction of living as the person you're truly meant to be. The phoenix rises not despite the fire, but because of it. And so will you. Your reconstruction is underway, your transformation is happening, and the world awaits the gift of your emerging self. What happens when reconstruction becomes so complete that momentum takes over. When the habits you've built, the mindset you've cultivated, and the vision you've crystallized begin to propel you forward almost effortlessly. We've journeyed through destruction, navigated the void, and engaged in the deliberate process of reconstruction. Now we arrive at a state that might seem mythical from where you began, becoming unstoppable. This isn't about perfection. Becoming unstoppable doesn't mean you never stumble or face doubt. It means that when you do, and you will, the force of your commitment carries you through. Like a river that might encounter rocks or fallen trees, you may change course slightly, but nothing prevents your forward movement. The reconstruction we explored creates the foundation, but unstoppable momentum is something else entirely. It's what happens when transformation stops being something you're working toward and becomes who you are. Remember Elena, who joined the writers' group during her reconstruction? 2 years later, she no longer tries to write or works on becoming a writer. Writing is simply what she does, as natural as breathing. Even on days when inspiration feels distant, her established practice carries her to the page. The momentum of her transformation has made stopping more difficult than continuing. This phase of becoming unstoppable emerges from 5 key elements: identity integration, compound momentum, strategic resilience, flow state mastery, and expansion beyond self. Let's explore how each develops and contributes to your unstoppable force. Identity integration occurs when your new behaviors and mindsets are no longer separate from your self-concept. During early reconstruction, you might have thought, "I'm someone who exercises now," or "I'm learning to speak up in meetings." With identity integration, this shifts to simply being who you are. "I'm an active person," or "I'm someone whose voice matters." The distinction might seem subtle, but it's profound. When behaviors align with identity, internal resistance melts away. You're no longer pushing against your own nature, but expressing it. The energy once spent on internal negotiation, "Should I do this? Do I want to?" becomes available for forward movement. James, who transformed from a procrastinating perfectionist to a consistent creator, describes this shift. "I used to debate with myself every morning about whether to work on my projects first or check emails. Now I don't even think about it. Sitting down to create before anything else is just who I am." The decision was made once, not daily. This integration doesn't happen immediately. It grows through consistent action and intentional thought patterns. Each time you act in alignment with your emerging identity, you strengthen neural pathways that support it. Each time you consciously recognize yourself embodying your vision, you reinforce the integration. The second element of becoming unstoppable is compound momentum. Like compound interest in finance, small consistent efforts accumulate returns that themselves generate further returns. Early in transformation, progress often feels linear, effort in, results out. But unstoppable momentum is exponential. The skills you develop make learning new skills easier. The connections you build introduce you to opportunities and people that accelerate your growth. The small successes you achieve generate confidence that makes larger successes possible. Consider Maya, who began rebuilding her life after addiction recovery. Initially, her transformation focused on maintaining sobriety through daily practices and support groups. As these behaviors solidified, she developed clarity and energy that helped her excel at work. Her professional success provided resources to pursue education in addiction counseling. Now she leads programs helping others through early recovery, continuously deepening her own insights through teaching. Each stage built upon the previous one,
creating acceleration that would have been impossible to force at the beginning. This is the nature of compound momentum. Patience at the start yields increasing returns over time. To cultivate compound momentum in your own journey, identify areas where growth in one domain can catalyze advancement in others. How might improved physical well-being enhance your mental clarity for creative work? How could deepened self-awareness strengthen your leadership capacity? By recognizing these connections, you strategically direct your energy where it generates the greatest compound effect.
The third element of becoming unstoppable is strategic resilience, not just the ability to recover from setbacks, but to anticipate and integrate them into your forward movement. Everyone experiences obstacles. What distinguishes those with unstoppable momentum is their relationship to these challenges. Rather than seeing setbacks as failures or interruptions to their journey, they view them as valuable data and strengthening experiences. Resilience at this level isn't reactive but proactive. Instead of waiting for difficulties to arise and then responding, you build systems that anticipate common obstacles. You develop contingency plans for predictable challenges. You maintain reserves, emotional, physical, financial, temporal, that provide flexibility when unexpected situations emerge. Thomas, who transformed his relationship with work after burnout, describes his approach. I used to push until exhaustion, crash, and then restart the cycle. Now I monitor my energy like an athlete, scheduling recovery before it's desperately needed. When unusually demanding projects arise, I'm operating from surplus rather than deficit. Strategic resilience also involves curating environments that support rather than undermine your momentum. This includes physical spaces, digital environments, and most crucially, relationship ecosystems. The people surrounding you either enhance or diminish your resilience through their expectations, responses to your growth, and their own relationship with challenge. Assess your environments honestly. Where do you encounter friction that drains your momentum? Where do you find support that enhances it? Making deliberate choices about these environments isn't selfish. It's essential stewardship of the transformation you've worked so diligently to create. The fourth element of becoming unstoppable is flow state mastery, the ability to regularly access optimal psychological states where action feels effortless and time seems to transform. Most people experience flow states occasionally and by chance, those magical moments when you're so absorbed in what you're doing that everything else falls away. But those with unstoppable momentum learn to generate these states intentionally through understanding their personal triggers and requirements. Flow emerges at the intersection of high skill and appropriate challenge. Too little challenge leads to boredom. Too much creates anxiety. As your skill increases through consistent practice, you must calibrate challenges accordingly to maintain the flow channel. Beyond this basic balance, flow has specific prerequisites: clear goals, immediate feedback, concentration, a sense of control, and intrinsic motivation. By deliberately structuring your activities to incorporate these elements, you can increase the frequency and duration of your flow experiences. Wei, a software developer who transformed from competent professional to recognized innovator, engineered his work environment specifically for flow. I identified my optimal focus times and protected them religiously. I removed notification interruptions and designed my workspace for minimal distraction. Most importantly, I connected my projects to purposes that genuinely matter to me, which makes dropping into flow almost automatic. As you master flow state induction, you discover a remarkable paradox. The times when you're exerting your greatest creative or intellectual effort often feel like the times of least resistance. This effortless effort becomes a hallmark of unstoppable momentum. The fifth element that characterizes becoming unstoppable is expansion beyond self, the natural progression from personal transformation to wider impact. There comes a point in profound transformation when the boundary between personal development and contribution begins to blur. What started as a journey to improve your own life increasingly expresses itself through service, mentorship, creation, or leadership that benefits others. This expansion isn't about abandoning self-focus for selflessness. Rather, it recognizes the interconnection between individual and collective flourishing. As your capacity grows, so does your ability to address challenges beyond yourself. As your wisdom deepens, so does your responsibility to share it appropriately. Laya, whose transformation journey began with healing childhood trauma, eventually founded a non-profit providing arts education for disadvantaged youth. Helping these young people access creative expression isn't separate from my healing work, it's the natural extension. My personal growth created capacity that seeks expression beyond myself. This expansion often begins small and close, perhaps mentoring one person on a similar path, or contributing your strengthened skills to community projects. As momentum builds, your impact radius naturally widens. The key is recognizing opportunities for contribution that genuinely align with your values and energize, rather than deplete your momentum. As these 5 elements, identity integration, compound momentum, strategic resilience, flow state mastery, and expansion beyond self, develop in your life, you experience the distinctive quality of becoming unstoppable, a profound trust in your capacity to move forward, regardless of circumstances. This isn't blind optimism or denial of real obstacles. It's earned confidence based on tangible evidence of your transformation. You've witnessed yourself overcome challenges that once seemed insurmountable. You've experienced the compound effects of consistent action. You've developed systems that support your continued growth, even when motivation fluctuates. This trust fundamentally changes your relationship with the future, where once you might have approached new challenges with anxiety about your ability to handle them, you now move forward with curiosity about how your capacities will manifest. Uncertainty remains, but it generates excitement rather than fear. Becoming unstoppable also transforms your relationship with time. The desperate urgency that often characterizes early transformation, "I need to change right now," gives way to strategic patience. You recognize that meaningful change unfolds through seasons, each with its purpose. Sometimes rapid growth is appropriate, other times consolidation and integration are needed. This patience isn't passivity, it's the confident knowledge that consistent action, even when progress seems imperceptible, inevitably creates momentum. Like the bamboo that grows only inches in its first 5 years, while developing an extensive root system, and then grows up to 3 feet daily in its 5th year. Your momentum may build quietly before manifesting visibly. As you embody unstoppable momentum, you'll notice subtle shifts in how you approach challenges. Problems that once seemed like walls blocking your path now appear as interesting puzzles to solve or navigate. Your question shifts from "Can I overcome this?" to "How will I overcome this?" This mental positioning is crucial. The moment you question if you can move forward, you've introduced doubt that drains momentum. When you assume forward movement and focus only on the method, you maintain the psychological state that supports unstoppable progress. Michael, who transformed from someone with debilitating anxiety to a public speaker and advocate, describes this shift. "I still feel nervous before presentations. The difference is I no longer wonder if I'll get through it. I know I will. So instead of fighting the anxiety, I focus on how to channel that energy into a more compelling delivery." Becoming unstoppable also involves recognizing when deliberate rest serves your momentum better than continued action. Just as a heartbeat requires both contraction and relaxation, sustainable progress requires alternating periods of intensity and recovery. The unstoppable person isn't constantly in motion, but consistently returning to purposeful movement after appropriate rest. This rhythm of engagement and renewal prevents the burnout that often derails transformation. It recognizes that human systems, physical, cognitive, emotional, creative, function optimally when oscillating between expenditure and restoration rather than maintaining constant output. Elena, our writer from earlier, discovered this principle through experience. I used to think writing every single day was the only way to maintain momentum. When life interrupted this streak, I'd feel like a failure starting over. Now I plan deliberate fallow periods where I read, experience life, and let ideas compost. These breaks make my writing more potent when I return to it. As momentum builds, you'll encounter resistance in new forms. Some will come from systems and relationships calibrated to your previous identity. As you embody your transformation more fully, you may disrupt established patterns around you, triggering others' discomfort or attempts to reinstate former dynamics. This external resistance requires discernment. Some relationships will adapt and grow alongside you. Others may need compassionate renegotiation of boundaries and expectations. A few might naturally conclude as your paths genuinely diverge. Navigating these transitions with integrity is part of becoming unstoppable, honoring your transformation while respecting others' journeys. You'll also encounter internal resistance in the form of upper limits, unconscious ceilings on success, joy or fulfillment that you've internalized. Just when momentum carries you to new heights, you might inexplicably sabotage your progress or create problems that dissipate positive energy. Recognizing these patterns as normal aspects of growth, rather than mysterious failures, is crucial. Each time you identify and move beyond an upper limit, you expand your capacity for achievement and fulfillment. The unstoppable person doesn't avoid these limits, but sees them as opportunities to release outdated constraints. Becoming unstoppable eventually transcends the specifics of what you're doing and enters the realm of how you're being. Your presence itself begins to carry a quality that influences those around you. Without explicit effort, you inspire others to recognize and pursue their own potential for transformation. This influence flows naturally from congruence, the alignment between your words, actions, values, and presence. People sense authenticity. They respond not just to what you've accomplished, but to the integrity with which you've accomplished it. Your journey becomes a possibility model that expands others' sense of what's achievable. Remember that becoming unstoppable doesn't mean perpetual happiness or absence of struggle. You'll still encounter periods of doubt, confusion, or pain. The difference is that these experiences no longer derail your fundamental direction. They become integrated into your journey rather than interrupting it. In moments when momentum seems to falter, return to the foundations we've explored throughout this journey. Reconnect with your vision, not just intellectually, but viscerally, feeling the reality of what you're creating. Review the evidence of your transformation thus far, acknowledging how far you've already come. Engage your supportive community for perspective when your own view narrows. Most importantly, maintain the consistent actions that built your momentum initially, even when these actions temporarily feel mechanical or their purpose seems unclear. They maintain the structure through which renewed inspiration and energy will flow. As we conclude our exploration of becoming unstoppable, consider how this phase might manifest in your life. What areas of transformation have already generated momentum? Where do you sense potential for compound effects?
How might your personal growth expand into meaningful contribution? The path we've traveled together from destruction through the void, into reconstruction and now to unstoppable momentum isn't linear but cyclical. As you evolve, you'll encounter new aspects of yourself requiring transformation, new voids of possibility, new reconstructions to undertake. The difference is that you now approach these cycles with the wisdom of experience. You recognize that discomfort signals growth, not danger. You trust the creative potential of uncertainty. You know how to deliberately reconstruct what matters most. And you've experienced the power of momentum that carries you beyond your perceived limitations. This journey of transformation is perhaps the most profound adventure available in human experience, the continuous discovery and creation of who you truly are and what you're capable of contributing. It requires courage, commitment, and compassion, qualities you've demonstrated by engaging so deeply with this process. Remember that becoming unstoppable isn't an end point, but a dynamic state of being. It's the ongoing choice to align with your highest potential, to move with rather than against the current of your authentic purpose, to transform obstacles into opportunities for deeper wisdom and broader impact. Your journey continues beyond these words. Your momentum builds with each aligned choice. Your transformation impacts ripples outward in ways you may never fully perceive. You are becoming the person you were born to be, and in that becoming, you're already unstoppable. What does it mean to truly become the author of your own life? To stand at this moment, looking back at the path that brought you here, and forward to the infinite possibilities that await. We've journeyed together through destruction, embraced the creative void, engaged in deliberate reconstruction, and discovered what it means to become unstoppable. Now we arrive at perhaps the most significant threshold of all, the moment when you fully claim your transformation and declare it to the world. This is your manifesto, your declaration of who you are becoming and what you stand for. Not written in temporary ink, but etched into the very fabric of your being through conscious choice and consistent action.
Throughout history, manifestos have marked pivotal moments of change. They've launched movements, transformed societies, and redirected the course of human events. But the most powerful manifesto you'll ever encounter is the one you write with your life. The clear, unwavering statement of your values, vision, and commitment that guides every decision and interaction. The word manifesto comes from Latin, meaning to make public. There's profound power in this act of declaration. When you articulate who you are becoming, first to yourself and then to others, you create a field of accountability and possibility that accelerates your transformation. Think about those moments when you've spoken your truth aloud, perhaps sharing a goal or commitment with someone you trust. The mere act of vocalization shifted something within you. What had been a private thought became more real, more substantial. Your manifesto amplifies this effect exponentially. Let's begin crafting your manifesto by recognizing a fundamental truth. You are not merely what has happened to you, but what you choose to become. Your past experiences, whether triumphant or traumatic, have shaped you, but they don't define your future unless you grant them that authority. Remember Wei, the software developer who engineered his environment for flow states. His transformation began after a career-threatening burnout. For months, he shares, I defined myself by that failure. My manifesto moment came when I realized I could use that experience not as an endpoint, but as data for creating a more sustainable and creative professional life. Your manifesto acknowledges where you've been while decisively declaring where you're going. It honors your journey without being limited by it. It recognizes that while you cannot control every circumstance you encounter, you retain the ultimate authority over how you respond and who you become through those responses. This understanding that you are the primary creative force in your own life isn't about denying reality or dismissing genuine constraints. It's about recognizing your agency within those realities. It's claiming the power that has always been yours, the power to choose your perspective, your focus, your actions, and ultimately your impact. Your manifesto begins with clarity about your non-negotiable values, those core principles that remain constant regardless of external circumstances. These aren't abstract concepts but lived commitments that guide your decisions, especially when those decisions are difficult. Leah, who transformed her trauma into service through arts education, describes her values clarification. I realized integrity, creativity, and compassion weren't just nice words but the standard against which I measure every significant choice. When opportunities arise that compromise these values, no matter how attractive, my answer is clear. Take a moment to consider, what are your non-negotiable values? What principles would you maintain even when doing so is inconvenient or costly? These form the foundation of your manifesto, the bedrock upon which everything else is built. Beyond values, your manifesto articulates your vision, not just what you want to accomplish, but who you are becoming through those accomplishments. This vision transcends specific goals to capture the essence of your desired impact and experience. Goals change as circumstances evolve, but vision provides continuity through these adaptations. When Sarah's initial goal of becoming a classroom teacher shifted due to unexpected life changes, her vision of nurturing learning and growth remained intact. This allowed her to find fulfillment through educational consulting, where she influences more students indirectly than she could have reached directly. Your vision isn't a fixed destination but a direction, a North Star that guides your journey even as the specific path adjusts to the terrain you encounter. It answers fundamental questions. What qualities do you want to embody? What impact do you want to have? What experiences do you want to create for yourself and others? With values and vision established, your manifesto addresses your approach to challenge and growth. This isn't about affirming that everything will be easy. It's quite the opposite. It's declaring how you'll engage with difficulty, knowing that your greatest development often emerges from your most demanding experiences. Marcus, whose health transformation we discussed earlier, frames it this way: my manifesto includes the commitment to view obstacles as teachers rather than enemies. This doesn't make challenges disappear, but it transforms my relationship with them. I'm no longer devastated by setbacks because I'm too busy looking for their lessons. Your manifesto might include statements like, I embrace discomfort as the territory of growth, or I meet resistance with curiosity rather than defeat, or I transform obstacles into opportunities through creative response. These aren't positive affirmations detached from reality, but commitments to a specific stance toward the inevitable challenges of meaningful living. An essential element of your manifesto is your declared relationship with failure. Our culture often presents failure as something to avoid at all costs, but those who achieve remarkable transformations understand it differently. They recognize failure not as the opposite of success but as an integral component of it, a necessary step in any significant achievement or growth. James, the former perfectionist who became a consistent creator, includes this in his manifesto. I celebrate my failures as evidence of my courage. Each represents a risk taken, a boundary pushed, a comfort zone expanded. The only true failure would be allowing fear to prevent my attempts. Consider how your relationship with failure has evolved through your transformation journey. How might your manifesto redefine failure in a way that serves rather than hinders your continued growth?
What would change if you viewed your failures as valuable data, necessary iterations, or meaningful redirections rather than devastating endpoints?
Your manifesto also articulates your commitments to others and to the larger systems of which you're part. Transformation never happens in isolation. As you've discovered your own capacity for change, how are you called to support others in their journeys? As you've developed new strengths and insights, how might you apply these to addressing challenges beyond yourself? Elena, whose writing practice became unstoppable, eventually started a literacy program in her community. My manifesto includes the commitment to create access for others, she explains. My transformation showed me that expression is essential to becoming fully human. Now I'm dedicated to removing barriers that prevent others from discovering their voices. These commitments aren't about sacrificing your well-being for others. Quite the opposite. They recognize that meaningful contribution enhances rather than depletes your vitality when aligned with your authentic gifts and values. They acknowledge the reciprocal nature of transformation. As you elevate others, you continue to elevate yourself. A powerful manifesto also addresses your relationship with time. In a culture obsessed with immediate results, declaring your commitment to patient, persistent action represents a revolutionary act. It states your refusal to sacrifice long-term fulfillment for short-term gratification or to abandon meaningful pursuits when immediate rewards aren't forthcoming. Thomas, who transformed his relationship with work, puts it this way: my manifesto includes the phrase, "I play the infinite game." This reminds me to make choices based on sustainable growth rather than temporary achievement. It keeps me focused on legacy over recognition. Your manifesto might include commitments like, I choose actions that serve my vision a decade from now, not just my comfort today, or I measure progress through consistent effort rather than immediate outcomes, or I trust the compounding effect of small aligned choices over time. As we near the conclusion of our journey together, it's time to consider how you'll embody your manifesto in daily life. A declaration, no matter how powerful, realizes its potential only through consistent expression in ordinary moments and decisions. This embodiment occurs at 3 levels: identity, practice, and community. At the identity level, you integrate your manifesto into your self-concept, how you think and speak about yourself both internally and with others. This isn't about claiming perfection, but about acknowledging your direction and commitment. At the practice level, you establish rituals and routines that reinforce your manifesto daily. These might include morning reflection on your values and vision, regular review of your progress and learning, or consistent engagement in activities that develop the qualities central to your transformation. At the community level, you surround yourself with relationships that reflect and support your manifesto. This doesn't mean isolating yourself with like-minded people, but it does mean ensuring your closest connections understand and respect the path you've chosen, even when they've selected different journeys. Your manifesto isn't static, but evolves as you grow. What begins as aspiration gradually transforms into experience and eventually wisdom that you can share with others. The core remains constant, your fundamental values and vision, while the expression refines with each cycle of learning and integration. Michael, whose transformation from anxiety to advocacy we discussed, describes this evolution. My initial manifesto focused on overcoming fear. As that became my reality, it evolved to emphasize creating safety for others, navigating similar challenges. The essence, courage, and connection remained, but the manifestation matured. As we complete our exploration, remember that your manifesto isn't something you create once and complete. It's a living document written through your daily choices and actions,
Each aligned decision strengthens its message. Each courageous step forwards amplifies its impact. The ultimate power of your manifesto lies not in its perfection, but in its authenticity, the genuine alignment between your deepest values and your visible life. This congruence creates a resonance that others sense intuitively, often before you've spoken a word. It's the quiet authority that comes not from position or power, but from integrity and purpose. You stand now at the intersection of all you've been and all you're becoming. The path of transformation stretches behind you, the destruction of limiting patterns, the creative void of possibility, the deliberate reconstruction, the development of unstoppable momentum. Before you lies the continued unfolding of your unique contribution and experience. Your manifesto bridges these territories. It honors your journey while declaring your direction. It acknowledges your growth while committing to continued evolution. It celebrates your uniqueness while connecting you to the universal human experience of becoming. In the quiet moments when doubt surfaces or clarity wavers, return to this manifesto, not as an ideal against which to measure yourself harshly, but as a compass that gently redirects you toward your authentic path. Let it remind you of the truth that has guided our entire exploration. Transformation isn't something you do, but something you are, a continuous process of discovery, creation, and expression that constitutes the very essence of being fully alive. The world needs your manifesto, not as words on a page, but as the living testimony of a life fully claimed and consciously shaped. It needs the unique wisdom, perspective, and contribution that only you can offer. It needs your courage to transform and your commitment to continue that transformation beyond yourself. As you move forward from this moment, carry this understanding with you. You are both the artist and the masterpiece, the writer and the story, the composer and the symphony. In claiming your power to create yourself, you participate in the most profound creative act available to human consciousness. This is your life. This is your manifesto. This is your time to declare and embody the truth of who you are becoming. The journey continues. The transformation deepens. And in that becoming, you inspire countless others to embark on their own paths of discovery and creation. The new you is emerging, has been emerging all along, through each choice, each challenge, each celebration. Not perfect, but authentic. Not finished, but fully engaged in the magnificent adventure of becoming.